Matthew Evans, a wealthy man in his late 70s, sat alone in his sleek silver Mercedes, his thumb tapping rhythmically against the steering wheel. The car's AC barely managed to cut through the heavy Kentucky heat. Retired from a long and lucrative career in finance, Matthew was used to having things go his way. But not today. Today, he sat stranded by the side of a rural road with a flat tire, miles away from the comforts of his immaculate mansion. After multiple failed attempts to call roadside assistance, he sighed, accepting the inconvenience. Then, just as frustration started to bubble, he noticed someone approaching. A boy, 13, maybe 14, was walking purposefully down the road. He wore a faded t-shirt and scuffed-up sneakers. His expression was focused, his pace confident. Matthew watched him curiously. The boy's eyes scanned the car, then met Matthew's with a polite nod. "Got a flat, sir?" he asked, voice calm and steady. "Yes," Matthew replied, a mix of relief and surprise in his tone. "I was trying to call for help, but there's no signal out here." The boy gave a small, assured smile. "I can help," he said, already kneeling beside the car. "My grandpa taught me how to change a tire last summer." "You got a spare?" Matthew gestured to the trunk. The boy moved without hesitation, retrieving the tools like he'd done it 100 times. His hands were sure, practiced, and steady, far more confident than his age suggested. As Matthew stood there watching, something unfamiliar began to stir in him. A quiet kind of humility. He hadn't felt that in years. He reached for his wallet, instinctively wanting to offer the boy something in return. But the boy didn't pause. He worked in silence until the job was done. Then he stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. "All done," he said, offering a modest smile. Matthew pulled out a few bills and extended them toward the boy. "Here. I really appreciate this." The boy took a small step back, lifting a hand politely. "Thank you, sir. But I'm good. Just glad I could help." Matthew stood frozen, money still in hand, watching the boy walk away. No payment. No fuss. Just a smile and a quiet dignity that lingered long after he was gone. Back in the car, Matthew watched the boy's silhouette disappear in the rearview mirror. As he drove, his thoughts returned to the encounter again and again. That self-assurance, where did it come from? It wasn't from money or status. It came from something else. Something deeper. That evening, seated in his leather armchair at home, Matthew couldn't stop replaying the moment. His study was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. Dinner, steak and asparagus, sat untouched. He thought of the thousands of people he'd met in his life. Colleagues. Partners. Investors. And how every interaction had strings attached. But not this one. This boy had offered something different. Something pure. He took a sip of scotch and stared into the middle distance. That kid didn't have much, worn shoes, dusty clothes, but he carried himself with a rare kind of honor. And that stayed with Matthew. The next morning, the curiosity became too loud to ignore. He had to find the boy. Was it guilt? Gratitude? He didn't know. He just knew he needed to. He got in his car and retraced his route from the day before, eyes scanning the road. Hours passed. He stopped at gas stations and diners, describing the boy. Most people just shrugged. Finally, at a small roadside cafe, an older woman behind the counter paused and said, "Sounds like you're talking about Elijah. That boy's always helping someone. Lives in Harlan, with his mama." "Harlan?" Matthew echoed, committing it to memory. "Thank you." The drive to Harlan took about an hour. Nestled in the Appalachians, the town was small, quiet. Modest houses lined the roads. Matthew asked around, and eventually someone pointed him to a small house at the town's edge. It was plain but well kept. The porch sagged a bit, but it had charm. Matthew parked, got out, and hesitated. What would he even say? He knocked. A woman in her early 40s opened the door. She looked tired, but there was kindness in her eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked, cautious but polite. "Good morning," Matthew said, clearing his throat. "Sorry to bother you. I think I met your son yesterday, Elijah. He helped me with a flat tire." Her face softened immediately. "That sounds like my Elijah," she said with a knowing smile. "He's always helping someone. I just wanted to thank him properly. He wouldn't accept anything from me." She nodded and stepped aside. "He's out back. You're welcome to wait." Matthew stepped inside. The house was simple, the furniture old but clean. Cozy in a way money couldn't buy. The walls were decorated with framed family photos and a few crayon drawings clearly made by a much younger Elijah. It was a world away from Matthew's own polished home with its glass sculptures and museum-level art. And yet, this place felt warmer, livelier, more human. He followed Elijah's mother out to the backyard. Elijah was there, hammering a new board onto the weathered fence. When he looked up and saw Matthew, his eyes widened in surprise. "Hey, mister," Elijah said with a smile, wiping his hands on his jeans. "What are you doing here?" Matthew smiled back, though he felt oddly nervous. "I wanted to thank you again. You helped me when I really needed it, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it." Elijah shrugged like it was nothing. It wasn't a big deal. But to Matthew, it had been huge. And he wasn't going to leave without acknowledging that. Elijah leaned casually against the fence, his gaze steady on Matthew. A pause settled between them. For a moment, Matthew felt like he was the one under a microscope. The kid's calm presence threw him off. "I don't think you realize how rare that is," Matthew finally said. "Helping a stranger without wanting anything back." Elijah tilted his head, genuinely puzzled. "I don't see it that way. If someone needs help and I can do it, why wouldn't I?" The words landed like a stone in Matthew's chest. He looked around the backyard. The fence was patched together with mismatched planks. The grass was thin, patchy. Behind the house, a rusted swing set leaned like it had given up standing. The place was worn, but held together with care and love. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," Matthew said. "Your mom must be proud." Elijah grinned and glanced toward the house. "She works hard. I just try to help where I can." Matthew stood silently, absorbing the moment. It stirred something he hadn't felt in decades, a connection to his roots. He'd grown up like this once. Small house. Big heart. Somewhere along the way, success had buried that part of him under polished marble floors and expensive wine. "I'd like to do something for you and your family," Matthew said gently. Elijah stood up straight, eyebrows raised. "We're okay, mister. We don't need anything." "It's not about need," Matthew replied. "It's about what's right. You helped me. I want to return the favor." Before Elijah could respond, his mother called out from the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Elijah, wash up. Lunch is almost ready." Then she looked at Matthew. "Would you care to join us? It's nothing fancy, but you're more than welcome." Matthew hesitated. He wasn't used to such invitations. But her sincerity left no space for excuses. "I'd like that," he said with a soft smile, following her inside. The kitchen smelled like heaven. Warm bread. Roasted vegetables. The table was modest, surrounded by mismatched chairs, but it was set with thoughtfulness. Matthew took a seat, feeling out of place in his tailored suit and polished shoes. Elijah joined them, freshly washed and full of that same easy energy. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally. Elijah talked about school, his friends, and how he dreamed of becoming an engineer. His mother spoke proudly about the community, the people who looked out for one another, who shared what little they had. Matthew found himself captivated. For all the luxury he'd accumulated, his own dinners were usually cold affairs eaten alone in silence. This was real. After lunch, while helping clear the table, Matthew turned to Elijah's mom. You've done a remarkable job raising him. He's got more heart than most people I've ever met." Her eyes sparkled with gratitude. "Thank you. He is a good boy. We've had our challenges, but we've learned to appreciate the little things." Matthew nodded, but his mind was already spinning. He didn't want to intrude, but he couldn't just leave either. This family had given him something priceless. A reminder of who he used to be. What mattered? He left their home that afternoon with a new sense of purpose. Driving back to his estate, he didn't put on the radio. He didn't call anyone. He just thought. This wasn't charity, he decided. It was respect. It was honoring a young man who reminded him of the best version of himself. The very next morning, Matthew got to work. He made phone calls to contractors, electricians, and old business contacts who still owed him favors. By noon, the plan was set. And within days, trucks and work crews began rolling up to Elijah's home. Matthew stood on the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, overseeing the whirlwind of renovations. Elijah and his mother watched nearby, stunned. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice catching as she took in the workers unloading new supplies. Matthew turned to her, his tone sincere. "You've done more than just get by, you've thrived. And you gave me something I didn't even know I was missing. Let me give back." Elijah stood quietly, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the crew. He looked thoughtful. Matthew crouched down slightly, meeting his gaze. "You taught me something," he said gently. "Helping people, it's not about money. It's about showing up. And I want to show up for you." In the weeks that followed, the house underwent a complete transformation. The sagging front porch was rebuilt with fresh wood. The leaky roof got a full overhaul. The old swing set in the backyard? Replaced with a brand new one. Inside, the walls were repainted, the floors restored to a glossy finish, and the kitchen was upgraded with modern appliances. It was a total rebirth. At first, Elijah tried to pitch in, hauling lumber, sweeping up dust. But Matthew stopped him with a smile. "Your job," he said, "is to just enjoy being a kid for a little while." Still, Elijah couldn't help but sneak out to watch. His eyes sparkled with fascination as he watched the crew measure, cut, and build. One of the contractors, a burly guy named Joe, noticed and waved him over. Soon Elijah was learning how to measure planks, ask questions about tools, and understand the bones of building. His curiosity lit up the sight. Matthew watched it all unfold from a distance, a proud smile tugging at his lips. It was the first time in years he felt like he was doing something that truly mattered. Not for prestige. Not for profit. Just for people. The boy's energy reminded Matthew of himself long ago, before boardrooms, before the stock market became his daily gospel. One golden evening, the sun low in the sky, the house was nearly finished. Elijah, his mom, and Matthew stood on the new porch, admiring what had become a warm and welcoming home. "This isn't just a house anymore," Elijah's mother said softly, emotion thick in her voice. "It's a home. I don't even know how to thank you." Matthew shook his head, eyes misty. "You already did. You reminded me what life's supposed to be about: family, connection, purpose. I think I'm the one who should be thanking you." The final day of the project felt more like a celebration than a construction wrap-up. Neighbors stopped by to see the changes. They brought bread, homemade jam, potted plants. Laughter echoed from the backyard as Elijah gave his friends a full tour: the swing set, the polished floors, the colorful new rooms. Matthew stood on the porch, leaning against the fresh railing. He felt something in his chest that had been dormant for years: joy. Real joy. Elijah's mother came over, handing him a glass of iced tea. "You didn't just fix a house," she said. "You gave us hope. And maybe, you found something too." Matthew nodded slowly. "I have. I spent so many years chasing the wrong things: money, influence, status. But none of it ever felt like this." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elijah joined them. His face was glowing with the kind of energy only a fulfilled kid has. "Mr. Matthew," he said thoughtfully, "I've been thinking a lot about what you did for us. I want to do something like that when I grow up. I want to help people too." Matthew placed a hand on his shoulder. "You already are, Elijah. You were the spark that started all of this. Don't ever lose that." The three of them sat quietly as the sky turned gold, then orange, then indigo. The warmth lingered, not just in the air, but in their hearts. When it was time for Matthew to leave, Elijah and his mom walked him to the car. The boy's grin and his mother's misty eyes stayed with him long after the car pulled away. And he realized, it wasn't the end. It was a beginning. In the following weeks, more changed. Elijah's interest in building bloomed into a true passion. Matthew arranged for him to shadow the same workers who had helped rebuild the house. The boy soaked up every lesson. And Matthew? He found himself returning to Harlan again and again. Not out of obligation. Out of something deeper. Each visit felt less like a trip and more like coming home. He was no longer a stranger in their lives. He was family. And for the first time in decades, he was truly content. The story ended where it began, in a quiet town with a wide open heart. Where one small act of kindness from a humble boy reminded a wealthy man of the most important truth. It's not about what you have. It's about what you give.